All three participants have emphasised the situation that contractors are facing. There's a vast array of factors that contractors need to take into consideration when making their choices, and this applies not only to the current state of play, but also to future operations. Diesel power has been dominant for so long, but with a whole range of choices being developed, the decision-making process is increasingly complex. Equipment manufacturers have an increasing range of powertrain options available to build into their machines. How should equipment buyers best approach these options when making their specification choices, and how should buyers evaluate what will best impact future sustainability and optimal fleet utilisation? I'm going to start with you, Dietmar, on this question.
Wow, that's a really good question. And I'd probably defer to Jeremy and Henrik on how people can choose the specific powertrain options. I think for us, what we look at this is, as we're talking about before, what can you do today versus what's the future look like in terms of real-time optimization. So we're kind of agnostic, to be honest, on what the powertrain options are. What we want to do is make sure that we're driving those to be most productive and most efficient in that time frame in which you're using it, right? So irrespective of what it is, whether it's diesel, hydrogen, or electric, you want to use the least amount of that resource as you're moving forward. It's really an economic choice that each organization has to make, and that part of that economic choice is reducing the ultimate fuel use and probably not putting all your eggs in one basket. We're not seeing anyone saying that that this one choice, go battery electric for everything, right? What we're seeing more so is across the spectrum of things that we're working on is it can be very site specific. Certain kinds of locations are going to work really well for battery and electric because power supply is really nearby, grids nearby. Other places are more remote, and so they're looking at different ways to power that resource. And so it takes kind of like the pointy pencil analysis that you need to look at to say, within the lifespan that we have of these kinds of projects, we want to make a selection across these kinds of different powertrain options ultimately, because there isn't a clear winner yet, I don't think, that we see in the short run.
Henrik.
Yeah, but I agree. I think also it depends on a lot of different things actually here. So I mean, it depends where in the world you are, so to say. And I think different countries have different opportunities here to deal with all different things. It also depends what type of machines you are running. For example, an excavator can be grid connected and so on. That's not perhaps the thing for an articulated haulers that is running long distance and so on. So that's not the same thing there. And it's also perhaps depends a little bit about where you are, what you're doing with them, what segment you're into, so to say. Is it quarry, perhaps have a good ability of electricity, so to say, because they are running the other equipment with electricity already from the earlier, so to say. If it's a road construction, that might be more tricky, so to say. So it depends on different circumstances, I would say, what should be the right solution for different customers and different machine types.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I think your original question was how should buyers proceed, I think, or make a selection. Put simply, I would say thoughtfully and carefully. Diesel as a fuel, as a power source, has been really convenient, I would say, for a long time. It kind of spoiled us probably when you start thinking about how complicated some of the other things are. You spec an engine based on your peak power demand. It's pretty easy to find a spot to package the fuel on board to do a full day's job or a couple days job in some cases. When you look at some of the alternate technologies, you got to be a lot more thoughtful about what it is you actually need. And there's a lot of trade-offs that kind of come with that. Obviously there are cost trade-offs, there are operational trade-offs, serviceability trade-offs, environmental trade-offs, things that all have to be thunk through. From an OEM perspective, a lot of the conversations we have is, okay, you've got an excavator or a wheel loader or pick your piece of equipment, and it's so big, and how much runtime do you need? And I think generically the first answer is like, a full shift. Could mean a lot of different things, right? So when you start thinking about, is a full shift 8 hours, 10 hours, or is it only 4? That's going to drive, from a battery perspective, a whole lot more power on board. Batteries are big and add weight and cost and different things, right? And of course, charge times and all the things that come with them. from a hydrogen perspective, again, independent of which solution, the runtime really comes down to how much can you package on board. And without a doubt, the packaging is more difficult than diesel would be just based on the fuel itself. So from an OE perspective, I think there's a lot of a balance between cost and what do you really need. And I think those same things translate down to the end user perspective, because I think it drives a lot of interesting conversations. You know, Mr. Contractor, Mrs. Contractor, do you need 8 hours worth of fuel? Or can you run 4 hours and do a top up, over lunchtime? Or do you even really run 8 hours, right? Maybe you really only run 3 or 4. I think it just forces you to really think through what your needs are versus what you're accustomed to, because it is just so different from what we've all kind of lived and breathed for the last, 100 years or 103 years now, I think for us, somewhere in that ballpark.